Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, Neighbor illegally built a fence across our shared lake and killed my lawn with herbicides. I recently moved to a new home and nearby my house was a beautiful lake. It was created years ago by the old homeowners and my current neighbor. He was a little on the older side, being in his 60s, and seemed to have a huge problem with me living here for no reason. I heard that he was good friends with the old owner and the two of them shared the full lake despite it crossing over the property lines. That wasn't a problem with me, and if he wanted to use the whole lake space to enjoy it as well as me, I was more than happy with that. Still, this guy seemed to absolutely hate me, like I personally kicked his best friend out of the home. For one thing, he seemed to complain about everything I did to the other neighbors and even the cops. I hosted a barbecue in my backyard one day because it was a nice day and a small get-together by a lake is always nice. He ended up calling the cops about a noise complaint despite it being 6 PM and us not even being loud. They did nothing, so he went and tried to badmouth me around the neighborhood. His biggest issues with me, though, seemed to always center around our lake. One day he even came up to me and tried to bully me out of staying away from it. Neighbor, I noticed that you were hanging out on my lake today. I was on the lake. It is on both of our properties though, and it was clear when I bought the house that it was half mine. Neighbor, you didn't put any hard work into it like I did. I don't want to see you on my lake ever again, or I will call the cops for trespassing. I knew that he didn't have a case and I waved him off and went on with my life. I still used the lake because I had just as much right as he did to use it. My guess was that he couldn't get the city or the cops to side with him though, because what he did next was more than radical. I went out back one day to find a fence between the properties. This seemed normal enough, many people have fences and I didn't mind it. The problem was that the fence ran all the way through the lake, dividing it in two. I thought this was the pettiest thing the man could do, and there was no way this fence was legal. I was not going to let him get to me though, and while I looked into his illegal fence, I still enjoyed the lake, even though it was less than ideal to only have half of it awkwardly. I guess my response was not to his liking though, because he wasn't finished there. In addition to building a lake, this guy was also big on his lawn and had all kinds of products. One day I came outside and saw that my entire lawn was destroyed. I didn't know much about lawns, but my friend did, and he said it was clearly destroyed using herbicides, and I knew right away this a-hole of a neighbor was responsible. I had enough with him and decided to just sue him for property damage and an illegal fence. It turns out that this was a painstaking process, and without any proof he was the one that did it, I couldn't do much. The courts basically said that as far as the lawn went, the charges were going to be dropped against him. However, the fence was fair game and that went to court with me wanting it taken down so I could have normal access to the lake that I should be able to have. The judge actually sided with me on this point and he was ordered to remove the fence. You would think this is where the story wraps up all nice with me winning the fence being taken down. Well, think again, because he immediately appealed this decision and in addition to it, put defamation charges against me because I was telling people that he destroyed my lawn. The nightmare of the courts continued and it was a very slow process. The entire time though, I was forced to constantly see the neighbor and not be able to say or do anything to him. Sometimes I would even see him in his yard with the herbicide trying to rub it in my face that he destroyed my property and ended up getting away with it. I was livid and honestly at this point I just wanted everything to go away. I did not care about the stupid lake or the fence, I just wanted this guy to leave me the hell alone. But since this time he was the one initiating the courts, I couldn't just walk away from it all. And then one day, everything changed when I saw the neighbor outside. He was minding his lawn near his side of the lake when he ended up falling right in. I thought after a moment that he would surface, but when he didn't, I got worried and hopped the fence. Then I jumped into the water and went to get the neighbor and drag him out. It turns out that he hadn't been using the lake in his older age because it wasn't safe for him to even be in the water anymore. If I wasn't there, he probably would have drowned. I half expected him to get mad at me for being on his property, but instead he smiled at me for the first time since I moved in. I got notified that the charges from the neighbor were dropped and I no longer had to deal with the courts or legal fees. Even better, he got the fence removed and I was able to use the lake correctly again. I wouldn't say that we were friends after that day, but he didn't want to bother or harass me anymore. I've been able to just live peacefully next door to him. Even though I can use the lake with no problem, I still tend to not want to use it while the neighbor is in his yard. The whole situation put a bad taste in my mouth about it. My lawn has since healed and stayed healthy as well, so I can try and put the whole situation behind me and maybe one day become friends with the neighbor again. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I gotta say, I wouldn't have been surprised if the neighbor still wanted to sue OP even after saving his life, because some of these entitled crazy neighbors, they just cannot give up. However, I am glad that for OP the situation worked out in the end. The next one is titled, Be a Douche, I Will Promote You. I worked at an auto parts store and we had just hired a new guy that seemed to have prior experience in the business, but damn, was he a douchebag. He was super jealous of my position and I had gotten a raise and I'm not shy about it. So anyway, I'm a sales lead and he is under me. He constantly undermines my authority and is just a general pain in the butt all the time. Ignores my instructions and always tries to threaten me with policy. So what I did was drop a hint that there was a store manager position that I was considering, which normally was a good position, but this store was a wreck and everyone knew it. Never held a manager for over a month, so of course he applies for the position just because he thought I did and got it by default. Nobody else had applied in over a month of it being open. Pretty soon he was working 120 plus hours on salary with no overtime pay, and the store barely broke even, so he did not get very good commissions, which is supposed to be like a quarter of their pay. I was making over double per hour with all the chill, cushy shifts in a fully staffed store that made bank. The store ended up shutting down and he got moved somewhere else. It did not ruin his life, but it had to be miserable for a while and he made less money per hour than he did before. Don't assume you are smarter than people you don't know. And the next one is titled, Awesome Petty Revenge. I will keep this as short as possible. I was biking around downtown and got a flat tire, so I went to the nearest shop to get it fixed. They only allow one person in the store at a time due to the pandemic, so when it was my turn I went inside and talked to the middle-aged woman at the cash counter. To be honest, she was not very polite, but I thought nothing of it because not only do I also work in retail and know what it is like, but everything is times 10 worse right now because of the pandemic. So anyways, after tolerating her for a few minutes, she tells me to wait outside until the bike is ready. Cool, no problem. I wait outside for maybe 15 minutes or so before I see my bike get brought back up to the cash. I waited a few more minutes for the lady to invite me back inside, but to no avail. After a few more minutes of waiting, I let myself inside, to which she said, "Excuse me, your bike is not ready yet. Wait outside until I tell you it's ready." Cool, no problem. I gave her another 15 minutes of my time before letting myself back inside and we had this exchange. Lady, "Do you not like to listen? I told you to wait until your bike is ready." Me, "I'm sorry, I just noticed the repairman bring the bike back up and I think it's ready." Lady, "Too bad, it hasn't been fixed yet." This broke me, so I just said, "Okay, thanks for your time, I'll be leaving." She looked a little flustered, but nonetheless held the door open for me as I grabbed my bike, walked outside and rode away with a free tire change. And the next one is titled, Fire Me and Don't Give Me My Money? Bad Idea. I got a job as an EMT after a 6-month community college training course. I was woefully unqualified, I barely knew the basics, but the teacher kept saying, "Don't worry, the new job will train you when you are hired." I got hired at an ambulance transport place that just took people to dialysis and things like that, not really emergency services. But there was no training, I was told to figure it out myself, etc. I didn't know what I was doing and I quickly realized that this was not a fit. However, I continued to try. On day 4, I was let go. I had worked 4 days total. I signed a paper with reasons they were firing me, all of which I agreed with, so I signed. I asked if they had my check ready. The man who was doing the paperwork said they didn't, but they would send it to me. Not exactly legal, but okay. I waited and waited, no check. I called to see where it was. I knew they were supposed to get that to me pretty quick by law, so I called a few times to see where it was. The boss lady was so rude, hanging up on me, not taking calls. When I did get someone, they would say, "We will mail it." I started researching labor laws because it was getting ridiculous, and that is when I found out that they have to give me a day's pay for every day my check is late, which was $150. So I stopped calling and started waiting. I finally got a check, but it was a payroll check, and it turns out I had worked 2 days in one pay period and 2 on the next one. So I called again to tell them and got yelled at by the boss lady. I waited another 2 weeks, got my last check and filed my claim with the labor board for not getting my final paycheck in the time allowed by law. It had been about a month by then. First meeting was a mediation where we tried to settle. Boss lady was not having it. She kept saying she didn't owe me anything and her offer was $500. She said this was all a setup by me. I knew they owed me closer to $3,000 and she didn't have a leg to stand on, so I refused. She stomped out and said I would be hearing from her lawyer, and next we went before a labor judge. This time evil boss had done her research. Every excuse an employer can use for not paying me the last check, she used. She said I moved. She said I never tried to call them, that they tried to call me numerous times. She said they tried to call me to get my address, but my number was changed. She said her husband was a cop and she was an honest person and I was a liar and did all this intentionally. She said I purposely didn't clock in and the times were messed up. She also claimed a ton of reasons why I was fired. She claimed I almost killed one of the patients, none of which were listed on the paper they made me sign, and the judge called her out on that. I went home, printed my phone records and highlighted all the calls, letter from my landlord saying I hadn't moved, etc., and took it back to the labor board and dropped it off. I didn't get to see the judge again, so I don't know if the judge ever saw it, but I did win the case. Plus the judge added 4 days because the last check was sent on a Friday before a 3-day weekend. I was only supposed to be paid until the postmark date, but I got paid till the following Tuesday, over $3,000. Also, the evil lady was not paying the ambulance drivers double overtime after 12 hours. So I let that slip while I was in the mediator's office and she said she would look into it, and I hope they did. And the next one is titled, Steal Millions, Bad Idea. Forgive me if this is long, this happened a while ago, but it is still so fresh in my mind. I left college with a business degree in one hand and no job in the other. And, like so many colleges, the promises of alumni willing to give jobs to graduates could not have been further from the truth. So I had to seek out my start from the bottom. I found a good job in operations at a company, I cannot say who without giving it away. I had a great boss who taught me pretty much everything I needed to know, and the work was great and the money was good. I need to explain how the business worked so you can understand how the plan worked. The corporate office was in California and we were not. There are a lot of things that went on at this company, and I cannot get into all of them because it would just take away from the story, but let's just say they had a very Stratton Oakmont vibe when it came to sales. I started outworked in operations with some of the smaller clients, but with some help from my boss I was able to climb the ladder rather quickly to the point of being over all the operations and order processing for the firm. We had a very large client, 90% of the company's business. The way it worked was we had 2 sets of sales reps, TSR and CSRs. TSRs were the heavy hitters who reached out to the other big businesses and tech firms to extend their warranties on a product. They made really good money. The CSRs were more of the mom and pop crowd and the inbound sales calls for those that wanted to extend their warranties. The reps were all given codes that associates the client's files with theirs, so if someone did a renewal automatically, they would get paid as if it was their client. A pretty sweet gig. The client hired the firm to be the middleman for their B2B as they handled all of their everyday clients. For every $100 that came into our firm, 18% or $18 would be for the company and the rest would be sent to the clients with the warranties activated. Most of the clients paid by CC or PO with a wire transfer, but there would also be a good amount of checks each week that would need to be processed. A little while after I started, the client check portion was now going to be overseen by one of the sales managers. Did not really faze me because I was working on the smaller accounts. Since we were a publicly traded company, all the sales reps' orders had to go to operations to be fulfilled. They were not allowed to process them on their own. This is when things started going downhill. My boss at the time was given temporary access to the financials as they were hiring a new CFO and he had a background with it. We went to lunch like we had done plenty of times before, but he seemed different. When I asked him if something was wrong, he told me that something looked off with our biggest client for one of the accounts. He wanted to make sure before he said anything to the higher-ups. While this was going on, I had been offered the chance to be our new compliance officer, which means I would need to make sure everything was on the up and up. Soon after though, I came in to find out that my boss was just terminated for a multitude of reasons, all of which had to be untrue because he was a pretty well-liked guy with not just the company, but with our clients as well. As I log into my terminal, I see that before he left, he had given me admin access to his files. Here is where things started to pop off. Remember those checks that clients were sending in to renew their warranties? Well, we were cashing them, alright. Apparently, we just were not adding those renewals to their products in the system that would have triggered a payout to our client who, as you remember, would be getting 82% of that money. Instead, they were cashing the checks, keeping the money, and using the interest in the accounts. And yes, in the mid-2000s, banks actually paid interest to cover losses in their collections department. It was wild to see that this was happening and something had to be done. So I hatched a plan. First things first, secure a new job because it won't be a fun place to work after this. Done. My previous boss knew of other companies that would scoop me up, put in my notice and stated in my exit interview that I just couldn't be a part of what was happening, and even though HR was in on this, I wanted it on the record. Next, I get approval for overtime for all the operations crew to come in on a Saturday and double pay them. They arrive early Saturday, obviously not too thrilled as to why they are here. However, I explained that if they complete the task, not only do they get their overtime, but they get nice bonuses. They were then much happier. They spent the entire day applying all of those checks dated back years to the client's accounts. We are talking millions of dollars. When all the sales reps arrived Monday, they were shocked as hell. Not only did they meet their weekly goals before picking up the phones, they made their monthly and quarterly goals too. 2 weeks into the new quarter. Cheers! Partying, yelling, screaming, celebrating, except sales management. They went from being really excited to skeptical to confused to, oh damn, in about 2 hours. They realized where it must have come from. Because not only did the company hit all these sales since it had been over a day, the client came into work Monday to see a very nice payday in their system as well. And like anyone would have questions and says they are coming out to congratulate the team on such great numbers. So management starts scrambling because they cannot figure out how this happened, and all under my boss's old login. On my last day I arrive in the lobby, I've got my box for the last of my things, etc. A guy walks up to me as I was waiting for the elevator and we strike up a conversation. He noticed my box and jokes about getting fired, and I just tell him I had a great opportunity come up, so I decided to leave. Before the situation gets worse. We laughed. Really nice down-to-earth guy. He realizes we are getting off on the same floor. He asks if I work for X. I say yes. He asks where. I tell him operations, and he reveals that he is the CEO of our client. And then we go our separate ways. The client shows up and there is a big party. Afterwards, the client says that they would love to get a breakdown of where most of the sales came from so they can allocate more money to that department. Management says sure, but it made up a lie about how they cannot share client payment info due to regulations. Cue my exit from the company. 2 weeks go by and I get a phone call from a number I don't recognize, so I let it go to voicemail. When I get off work, I checked it to find out it was the CEO of the client where I used to work. He has had something come up and would like to talk to me. Of course, I am nervous as hell, but I call him back and he picks up on the first ring and we get to chatting for a bit and he finally just asks me, "Why did you leave?" I tell him I had a great opportunity come up. He doesn't buy it and says that apparently my comment about the situation getting worse really stuck with him and he thinks something more is going on. So after a little more prodding from him, I tell him, just look at collections, and that's all I can say. He thanks me and I hang up. 2 days later he pulled the plug on the account. Apparently my old company tried to threaten him with a lawsuit for pulling the account 3 years early. He replied with, "That's fine, because when I show the courts that I have the evidence that you committed fraud." Corporate came in and cleaned the house. All of management was fired within the day. 1 month later, my friends and I had a very memorable trip in Vegas, all courtesy of our old client. Epilogue. Best part, I guess this should have been part of the story. My old boss was an adopted kid, treated his adopted parents great, while their real kids didn't, and when they passed, they left him all their money. Just all of it. This was about 2008. He was in a weird place because he loved his parents and was really close to them. He went to his church to pray for his parents and for what to do with this new landfall of money. He loved working, but did not need to anymore. He left the church and went to a bar, because I mean, who doesn't? He sits next to a guy who, and this is almost out of a movie, is a developer and has run out of money to finish his development because it is 2008 and no one is loaning money. They get to talking and he thinks, maybe this is a sign. I will speed this up because I've got to run to work, but he invests in the guy's development by buying all the houses dirt cheap at the time and now lives off the residual income from all of them being rentals. Life sucks because so many people do crappy things and get away with it, so it is great when good things happen to good people. And Ripe Stars, if you have any feel-good revenge stories or malicious compliance stories to share of your own, then please feel free to share them on r/Ripe Stories on Reddit, where you can submit your own stories, and there is a good chance that I will read them in a video. Thank you so much. And Ripe Stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional Ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/RipeYouTube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.